The morning sky hung low and gray over Pine Ridge Lake, the kind of winter day that made most people hurry from their cars to buildings with heads down and shoulders hunched. But not him. He loved these quiet mornings when the world seemed to hold its breath under a blanket of snow. The man pulled his worn blue knit cap lower over his ears as he continued his Sunday walk around the lake. His friends often teased him about these walks, saying only a crazy person would choose to be outdoors in 20-degree weather when there was perfectly good central heating at home. But these moments alone with his thoughts had become sacred to him over the years. He was a carpenter by trade, with hands that told stories of decades of honest work, calloused palms, a slightly crooked index finger from an accident with a nail gun years ago, and skin that remained rough despite the moisturizer his sister always gave him for Christmas. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced life's challenges head-on and emerged stronger for it. The lake path curved through a stand of bare birch trees, their white trunks stark against the gray-blue ice of the lake. He paused to watch a cardinal dart between branches, a flash of brilliant red against the monochrome landscape. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in this peaceful scene. A child's scream, high and terrified, followed by another. His body reacted before his mind fully processed what was happening. He sprinted toward the sound, boots crunching through the fresh snow. Breaking through the tree line, his heart nearly stopped at what he saw. About 50 yards from shore, 2 small children had fallen through the ice, their bright winter coats visible against the dark water as they struggled to keep their heads above the surface. "Hold on," he shouted, already pulling off his heavy coat. "I'm coming. Try to stay still." He scanned the shoreline desperately, looking for anything that might help. There was no one else around. No rescue equipment, nothing but the contents of his pockets, a phone, wallet, and keys. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911, speaking rapidly as he moved toward the ice. Emergency on Pine Ridge Lake, east side near the birch grove. 2 children fallen through the ice. I'm going to try to reach them. Please hurry. The dispatcher's voice urged caution, told him to wait for emergency services, but the panic in the children's voices made waiting impossible. He could see them struggling to hold onto the jagged edge of the ice, their small, gloved hands slipping. The girl looked no more than 9, the boy perhaps 7, siblings from their matching green coats. "Just hang on, kids," he called, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. He'd grown up near this lake, knew its moods and dangers. The ice near shore should be solid enough to bear his weight if he spread it out. He lay down at the edge where the ice met land and began to inch forward on his stomach, distributing his weight as broadly as possible. The cold bit through his clothes immediately, but he barely noticed. His focus narrowed to those 2 frightened faces and the distance between them. "Help us, please." The little girl's voice shook with cold and fear. "My brother can't swim good." "I'm coming, sweetheart. Both of you try to stay as still as possible. Don't pull on the ice, it'll just break more." 20 yards out, he heard the first warning crack beneath him. He froze, heart hammering in his chest. When nothing gave way, he continued forward, moving with agonizing slowness. Each inch gained was a victory, each foot a triumph against the voice in his head screaming about the danger. He could hear the little boy crying now, a soft, hiccuping sound that tore at his heart. The cold water would be sapping their strength quickly. Hypothermia was a silent killer, and these were just children with small bodies that would cool rapidly. "What's your names?" he called, trying to keep them alert and focused. The girl's teeth chattered violently. "I'm Lily. This is my brother Danny." "Nice to meet you, Lily and Danny. I'm going to get you out of there, okay? My name's Ray. I build houses for a living, so I'm pretty strong. You just hold on a little longer." He was close enough now to see their faces clearly, brown eyes wide with fear, lips turning an alarming shade of blue. The boy, Danny, seemed to be struggling more, his small arms trembling with the effort of holding onto the ice. Ray could see that the children had ventured out following what looked like a small dog's paw prints in the snow. The animal, lighter and with weight distributed on 4 paws, had likely crossed safely, leaving a deceptive trail. 30 yards out, another crack, louder this time. Ray felt the ice shift slightly beneath him but kept moving. 40 yards. He could almost reach them now. "That's it, you're doing great," he encouraged, his voice remarkably calm. "Lily, I'm going to reach for your brother first since he looks more tired, then I'll get you right after." "Can you hold on just a bit longer?" The girl nodded bravely, though tears streaked her cheeks. Ray inched closer until he could almost touch Danny's outstretched hand. The ice beneath him groaned ominously. Okay, Danny, I need you to be really brave now. When I count to 3, I'm going to grab your wrists. Don't try to grab me. Let me do the holding, okay? The boy nodded, his eyes never leaving Ray's face. 1, 2, 3. Ray lunged forward the last few inches, his strong carpenter's hands closing firmly around the boy's skinny wrists. Danny was surprisingly light as Ray pulled him up and out of the water in one smooth motion, dragging him onto the ice beside him. Good job, buddy, Ray said, quickly positioning the shivering child on his back. Now lie flat just like me, okay? We're going to wait right here while I get your sister. Lily was only a few feet away, but those few feet might as well have been miles. The ice where Danny had been was now a gaping hole, and to reach Lily, Ray would need to move around it onto ice that might be even weaker. In the distance, he finally heard sirens. Help was coming, but not soon enough for the girl whose strength was visibly failing. I'm cold, she whispered, her grip on the ice loosening. No, stay with me, Lily, Ray called sharply. Look at me, honey. Look right at me. Her eyes, dulling with cold and exhaustion, found his. That's it. Now, I'm going to slide around to you. The ice is going to make scary noises, but you just keep looking at me. Moving with painful slowness, Ray began edging around the broken section of ice, speaking continuously to keep the girl focused on his voice rather than her fear. The ice protested with cracks and groans that seemed impossibly loud in the winter quiet. Did you know I built a treehouse once? He asked, forcing lightness into his tone as he moved. It had 3 rooms and a rope ladder. Maybe someday I could show you how to build one. 5 more feet. The ice beneath him dipped slightly, water seeping up around the edges. Ray froze, then adjusted his position to distribute his weight differently. Ray? Lily's voice was alarmingly faint now. I don't think I can hold on anymore. Yes, you can, he insisted, his voice firm but kind. You're doing amazing, Lily. I'm almost there. Tell me about your favorite subject in school. I like science, she managed between chattering teeth. We're learning about butterflies. That's wonderful. When we get out of here, you'll have to tell me all about butterflies. I don't know much about them. 3 more feet. Ray could see that Lily's fingers, red and swollen from the cold, were losing their grip on the slick ice. Her eyes were starting to close. Lily, stay awake. The sharpness in his voice made her eyes flutter open again. That's it, look at me. I'm right here. With a final, desperate lunge that sent water sloshing over the ice, Ray grabbed Lily's coat just as her fingers slipped completely. For one heart-stopping moment, she sank below the surface, but his grip held firm. With strength born of pure adrenaline, he hauled her up and out of the water. The ice beneath them cracked alarmingly as he pulled her close, shielding her small body with his own. Danny, still lying flat where Ray had left him, began to cry with relief. I've got you both now, Ray assured them, his own body shaking with cold and fading adrenaline. Help is coming. Can you hear those sirens? We just need to stay still. The wait for rescue seemed endless. Ray kept talking to keep the children alert, telling them about the birdhouses he carved in his spare time, asking about their school, their friends, anything to keep their minds working. When Danny started to doze off, Ray gently shook him, knowing that sleep could be dangerous. By the time the rescue team reached them, carefully making their way out with proper equipment, all 3 were showing signs of serious hypothermia. As emergency workers secured the children onto rescue sleds, one of them clasped Ray's shoulder. You did an incredible thing here today, the paramedic said, helping Ray to his feet once they reached solid ground. Not many would have risked themselves like that. Ray, watching as the children were wrapped in emergency blankets and rushed toward waiting ambulances, simply nodded. He hadn't done anything special, he thought. He'd just done Delbite's hat needed doing. As they helped him toward the shore, his legs nearly giving out beneath him, Ray looked back at the treacherous ice and the dark water beyond. Only then, with the children safely in the care of professionals, did he allow himself to feel the fear that had been pushed aside by necessity. His hands trembled violently as the realization of what might have happened crashed over him. But alongside that fear was something else, a profound gratitude that he had been there, that his Sunday morning walk had put him in the right place at precisely the right moment. Some might call it coincidence, others fate. Ray didn't have a name for it. He just knew that today somehow he had been exactly where he needed to be. The ambulance siren wailed as it sped through the snow-covered streets, its red and blue lights reflecting off shop windows and parked cars. Inside, Ray sat shivering under 3 thermal blankets while a paramedic named Tom checked his vital signs. Across from him, Lily and Danny huddled together on the stretcher, their small bodies wrapped in similar blankets, their faces still pale but alert. "Your heart rate's coming down nicely," Tom said, removing the blood pressure cuff from Ray's arm. "But we still need to get you all properly warmed up at the hospital." Ray nodded, his teeth still chattering slightly. The adrenaline that had carried him through the rescue was fading, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and a spreading ache in his muscles. His clothes remained soaked despite the emergency team's efforts to dry him, and his fingers felt stiff and numb. "The kids okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Tom glanced at the children. "They're doing better than expected, thanks to you." Getting them out of that water so quickly made all the difference. Lily looked up at the mention of her and her brother. Her eyes, still a bit glassy from the cold, found Ray's. "You saved us," she whispered. The simple truth in those 3 words hit Ray harder than any elaborate thank you could have. He swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though they all knew that wasn't true. Danny, who had been quietly observing everything with wide eyes, suddenly asked, "Are you a superhero?" The question broke the tension, and Ray let out a surprised laugh that turned into a cough. "Nobody. Just a regular guy who happened to be taking a walk." "But you weren't scared of the ice breaking," Danny insisted. "And you're super strong. You pulled me out like I weighed nothing." Ray thought about the terror that had gripped him with each crack of the ice, the pounding of his heart as he'd inched across the frozen surface. "I was plenty scared," he admitted. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It just means you do what needs doing anyway." The ambulance slowed as it approached the hospital entrance. Tom prepared the children for transfer, checking their IV lines one last time. "County General has a great pediatric unit," he assured Ray. "They'll be in good hands." As the back door swung open, Ray tried to stand and nearly collapsed as pain shot through his legs. Tom and another paramedic caught him, easing him onto a waiting wheelchair. "Easy there," Tom said. "Your body's been through a lot." Those muscles seized up from the cold and the strain. The emergency room buzzed with activity as they wheeled Ray in behind the children's stretcher. Doctors and nurses swarmed around them, speaking rapidly in medical shorthand that Ray couldn't follow. He caught phrases like moderate hypothermia and possible frostbite concerns as they wheeled him into an examination room. A doctor with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair introduced herself as Dr. Chen. "Let's get you out of these wet clothes," she said, helping Ray with efficient, gentle movements. "You're suffering from hypothermia, though not as severe as it could have been. We need to warm you gradually to avoid shock." As she worked, checking his fingers and toes for frostbite damage, she asked, "The paramedics tell me you rescued 2 children from the lake?" Ray nodded, wincing as sensation began returning to his extremities in painful prickles. "How are they doing?" "They're being treated right now. Their parents just arrived. Apparently they'd let the kids walk their dog with strict instructions to stay away from the lake." Dr. Chen shook her head slightly. "Children don't always follow directions, especially when a curious dog leads the way." She finished her examination and helped Ray into a hospital gown. "We'll be keeping you overnight for observation. Your core temperature is still below normal, and I'm concerned about these." She gestured to his hands where the skin was red and swollen. "There's some frostbite damage here, though thankfully not severe. We'll need to monitor it." Ray hadn't even noticed the state of his hands, but now that she mentioned it, they throbbed painfully. "Will there be permanent damage?" he asked, thinking of his carpentry work. "It's too early to say for certain, but I'm optimistic. The fact that you can feel pain is actually a good sign." She patted his shoulder. "Rest now. I'll check on you again soon." After she left, a nurse helped Ray into a hospital bed, piling warming blankets on top of him and setting up an IV to deliver warm fluids directly into his bloodstream. Despite his protests that he was fine, exhaustion pulled at him, and he found his eyelids growing heavy. The last thing he remembered before drifting off was wondering if his tools would be safe in the truck he'd left parked near the lake. He woke to the sound of soft voices. Opening his eyes, he saw a man and woman standing hesitantly in the doorway of his room. The man was tall with glasses and an anxious expression. The woman was shorter with her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "He's awake," the woman whispered, then stepped forward. "I'm sorry to disturb you. We're Lily and Danny's parents. Ray pushed himself up against the pillows, grimacing at the stiffness in his shoulders. How are they doing? They're going to be fine, the father said, his voice breaking slightly. The doctors say there's no lasting damage. They're keeping them overnight just to be safe, but... He trailed off, clearly emotional. We wanted to thank you, the mother continued, moving closer to Ray's bed. If you hadn't been there today... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm just glad I was taking my usual walk, Ray said simply. The father stepped forward then, extending his hand. I'm Pete, and this is my wife Beth. Our family owes you everything. Ray shook Pete's hand awkwardly with his bandaged one. Ray Thompson. Honestly, I just did what anyone would do. But no one else was there, Beth said quietly. No one else saw them fall in. No one else risked their life on that ice. The firefighters who arrived said they've never seen anything like it, that the ice you crossed shouldn't have held your weight. Ray didn't know how to respond to that. The thought that he might not have made it back to shore himself hadn't really sunk in until now. The kids are asking for you, Pete said. When you're feeling up to it, they'd love to see you. Danny's telling everyone his superhero theory. He smiled slightly. I'd like that, Ray said, finding himself genuinely looking forward to seeing the children again. After Lily and Danny's parents left, promising to return the next day, Ray was examined again by Dr. Chen. She seemed pleased with his progress but frowned when she checked his hands. The swelling concerns me, she said, gently turning his right hand. And your heart rate is showing some irregularities. I'd like to run a few more tests. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures. An ECG, blood tests, x-rays of his hands and feet. By evening, Dr. Chen returned with a more serious expression. Mr. Thompson, the cold exposure has triggered some issues we need to address. There's evidence of strain on your heart. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but something we need to monitor. And the frostbite damage to your hands is more extensive than I initially thought. Ray felt a chill that had nothing to do with hypothermia. His hands were his livelihood. What does that mean for my work? I'm a carpenter. Dr. Chen sat on the edge of his bed. I believe with proper treatment and physical therapy, you'll regain most function. But it will take time, and there may be some permanent sensitivity to cold. How much time? Ray asked, thinking of the half-finished kitchen remodel he was supposed to complete next week. The bills that wouldn't wait for his recovery. At least 6 to 8 weeks before you can safely return to full manual work. Maybe longer. She held up a hand when she saw his expression. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but pushing it could result in permanent damage. After she left, Ray stared at the ceiling, trying to process this news. 6 to 8 weeks without income was impossible. His savings would cover maybe 3 weeks of expenses if he was careful. And his health insurance had lapsed 2 months ago when the premiums increased beyond what he could afford. He was still mulling over these worries when a nurse wheeled in a young visitor, Danny, looking much better than he had in the ambulance, though still pale. The boy's face lit up when he saw Ray. Mom said I could come say goodnight, Danny announced as the nurse positioned his wheelchair beside Ray's bed. Lily wanted to come too, but she fell asleep. I'm glad you're feeling better, Ray said, genuinely happy to see the boy's improved color and energy. Danny leaned forward conspiratorially. I told Alti. He doctors you're a superhero, but they don't believe me. That's okay, though. Superman keeps his identity secret, too. Ray chuckled despite his worries. How's your dog? The one that led you onto the ice? Pepper's okay. Dad found him back at home. He feels really bad about running away and causing trouble. Danny tilted his head, studying Ray. Does it hurt? He asked, pointing to Ray's bandaged hands. A little, Ray admitted. But the doctors are taking good care of me. When you get better, will you come visit us? Mom says you can come for dinner. She makes really good lasagna. The simple invitation from this child he'd saved touched Ray deeply. I'd like that very much, he said. After Danny left, Ray turned on the small TV mounted on the wall, hoping to distract himself from thoughts of medical bills and missed work. A local news report caught his attention. They were showing footage of Pine Ridge Lake, emergency vehicles surrounding it. With a jolt, he recognized himself being loaded into an ambulance. In a dramatic rescue today, the reporter was saying, a local man risked his life to save 2 children who had fallen through the ice at Pine Ridge Lake. Authorities say the children are expected to make a full recovery, thanks to the quick action of Good Samaritan Raymond Thompson. Ray switched off the TV, uncomfortable with being called a hero. He hadn't done anything special, just what needed doing. As night settled over the hospital and the pain medication began to make him drowsy, Ray found himself wondering what tomorrow would bring and how he would face the challenges ahead. 3 days later, Ray sat on the edge of his hospital bed, carefully pulling a sweater over his head with bandaged hands. Each movement was a small battle against stiffness and pain. The doctors had finally cleared him to go home, though with a long list of follow-up appointments, prescriptions, and strict instructions about what he could and couldn't do. Need some help with those? A nurse named Kelly asked, nodding toward the shoelaces Ray was struggling to tie. I've got it, Ray insisted, then sighed as his clumsy fingers fumbled again. Actually, maybe I could use a hand. As Kelly knelt to tie his shoes, Ray looked out the window at the gray winter sky. The reality of his situation was sinking in. The hospital social worker had spent an hour with him yesterday, going over his options for medical assistance, but the paperwork would take weeks to process. Meanwhile, the bills would start arriving long before that. Your ride here yet? Kelly asked, standing up. Ray nodded. My sister should be downstairs. Well, I printed out all your discharge instructions. She handed him a folder. And Dr. Chen left this for you. She placed a business card on top of the folder. It's for the hand specialist she recommended. She made some calls. He's agreed to see you at a reduced rate. That's really kind of her, Ray said, genuinely touched by the doctor's effort. Kelly smiled. You made quite an impression around here. It's not every day we treat someone who did what you did. A hospital volunteer appeared with a wheelchair, and despite Ray's protests that he could walk, hospital policy required him to ride to the exit. As they wheeled him through the corridors, several staff members stopped to shake his hand gently or pat his shoulder. Word of his rescue had spread throughout the hospital. Outside, his sister May stood beside her old station wagon, arms crossed against the cold. At 45, she was 3 years older than Ray, with the same warm brown eyes and determined expression, though laugh lines framed her face where Ray's showed signs of worry. About time, she said as the volunteer helped Ray to his feet. I was starting to think they'd decided to keep you. Ray knew his sister well enough to hear the concern beneath her gruffness. Sorry for the trouble, he said as she opened the passenger door for him. Don't be stupid, May replied, helping him with the seatbelt he couldn't manage himself. You'd do the same for me. As they drove through town, May filled the silence with updates about her job at the elementary school cafeteria, her teenage son's latest basketball game, the leak in her kitchen sink that her husband hadn't fixed yet. Ray was grateful she didn't ask him how he was feeling, or what he planned to do now. Those were questions he wasn't ready to answer. The streets looked different somehow, like a reminder that while he'd been in the hospital, the world had continued turning. They passed a corner store with newspaper racks out front, and Ray glimpsed his own face on the front page of the local paper. He turned away quickly. You're famous now, May said, following his gaze. Mom would have loved that. Her boy the hero. I'm not a hero, Ray muttered, uncomfortable with the label. May shot him a look. You nearly died saving 2 kids you didn't even know. What would you call it? He didn't have an answer for that. When they pulled up to his small rental house, Ray was relieved to see it looked exactly as he'd left it 3 days ago. Something about its familiar shabbiness, the peeling paint on the porch steps, the mismatched curtains visible through the windows was deeply comforting. Home sweet home, May said, helping him up the steps and unlocking the door with the spare key he kept hidden under a flower pot. I stopped by yesterday to turn the heat up and stock your fridge. Inside, the house was warm and smelled faintly of the lemon cleaner May favored. Ray sank gratefully onto his worn couch, suddenly exhausted from the short walk from the car. You look terrible, May observed, putting his bag of medications on the coffee table. I'll make some tea. While she bustled around his kitchen, Ray closed his eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of cups clinking, the kettle whistling, his sister humming tunelessly under her breath. When she returned, she had not only tea but also a plate of toast spread with peanut butter. You need to eat something with those pills, she said, setting everything down within his reach. Ray tried to pick up the mug but winced as pain shot through his fingers. May wordlessly wrapped his hands around it, helping him lift it to his lips. This is ridiculous, he muttered after taking a sip. I can't even hold a cup. It'll get better, May said firmly. The doctor said 6 to 8 weeks, right? That's not forever. It might as well be. Ray stared down at his bandaged hands. The mortgage is due next week? Electric bill the week after. And I still need to finish the Miller job. They've already paid half up front for materials. May sat beside him on the couch. We'll figure it out. Hal and I can help with the bills for a while. Ray shook his head. You've got your own family to worry about, and Hal's hours at the plant were already cut back last month. Then we'll find another way, May insisted. This community takes care of its own. Maybe we could set up one of those online fundraising things. No, Ray said sharply. No charity. May threw up her hands in exasperation. It's not charity when you've earned it. Why are you so stubborn about accepting help when you'd be the first to give it? They sat in silence for a moment, the old argument settling between them like a familiar guest. Finally, May sighed and patted his knee. Look, just focus on healing. That's your job right now. Let me worry about the rest. Before Ray could respond, there was a knock at the door. May went to answer it, and Ray heard murmured voices in the entryway. Ray, May called, you've got visitors. To his surprise, Pete and Beth, the parents of the children he'd rescued, stood in his living room, looking somewhat uncomfortable but determined. Behind them was a tall, thin man in an expensive-looking coat whom Ray didn't recognize. We hope you don't mind us stopping by, Beth said. The hospital gave us your address. She held out a covered dish. I made lasagna. Danny told me he invited you to try it. The unexpected kindness caught Ray off guard. Thank you, Pete stepped forward. How are you feeling? I've been better, Ray admitted, but the doctors say I'll recover. The stranger cleared his throat and Pete quickly introduced him. This is Howard Grant, he's a lawyer friend of ours. Ray tensed immediately. A lawyer could only mean complications. Was there some liability issue with the rescue? Were they planning to sue him for some reason? Seeing his expression, Beth quickly added, It's nothing bad, I promise. Howard has some expertise we thought might help. Howard took a seat in the armchair across from Ray. Mr. Thompson, what Pete and Beth have told me about your actions at Pine Ridge Lake is extraordinary. I understand from them that you're self-employed and uninsured. Ray nodded cautiously. And the hospital has indicated you'll be unable to work for some time due to your injuries? That's right, Ray said, wondering where this was going. Howard leaned forward. There's a fund specifically designed for Good Samaritans who are injured while helping others. It's not widely known, but as someone who serves on the board, I can tell you that your case is exactly what it was created for. I don't need charity, Ray began, but Howard held up a hand. This isn't charity, Mr. Thompson, it's recognition of service. The fund was established by a local businessman who was himself saved by a stranger 30 years ago. He created it specifically to ensure that people who act as you did aren't penalized for their heroism. Ray looked to May, who gave him a look that clearly said, I told you so. The application is straightforward, Howard continued, pulling papers from his briefcase. With your permission, I'd be happy to submit it on your behalf. The fund could cover your medical expenses and provide temporary income replacement while you recover. Ray felt a complex mix of emotions, relief tangled with pride and hesitation. He'd always believed in standing on his own 2 feet, but if this truly wasn't charity, I'll think about it, he said finally. Howard nodded and left the papers on the coffee table. That's all I ask, and regardless of your decision, Pete and Beth have asked me to help with your insurance claim for the hospital stay. After they left, promising to check in again soon, May gave Ray a pointed look. See? The universe takes care of people who take care of others. Maybe, Ray conceded, thinking of Howard's offer. The rest of the day passed quietly. May stayed until evening, helping Ray with the tasks his injured hands made difficult. Opening medication bottles, cutting food, even buttoning his shirt when he changed for bed. Each moment of dependency grated against his independent nature, but he was too exhausted to protest. As May was preparing to leave, there was another knock at the door. This time it was a local news crew. Mr. Thompson? A young reporter with a bright smile stood on his porch, cameraman behind her. I'm Alice Wong from Channel 4 News. We've been trying to reach you for an interview about your heroic rescue at Pine Ridge Lake. Ray started to close the door, but May stepped in. My brother is still recovering, she said firmly. This isn't a good time. We understand, Alice said quickly, but our viewers are very moved by his story. There's been an outpouring of support from the community. People want to help. Help how? May asked, while Ray stood silent behind her. Well, we've received calls from viewers wanting to donate to help with his medical bills. A local contractor has offered temporary jobs to his employees until he can return to work, and the children's school is organizing a thank you event. Ray felt overwhelmed. He hadn't expected any of this, hadn't wanted attention or recognition. He'd just done what anyone would do in his place, hadn't he? Tell them thank you, he said finally. But I'll be fine. May gave him an exasperated look over her shoulder but relayed his message more diplomatically. After the news crew left, she turned to him, hands on hips. Pride is all well and good, little brother, but it won't pay your bills or heal your hands. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help when you need it. Later that night, alone in his quiet house, Ray sat at his kitchen table staring at the papers Howard had left. The pain in his hands had intensified with the day's activities, a constant reminder of how far he was from returning to normal life. On the table beside the papers sat his stack of bills, the final notice from the health insurance company he could no longer afford, and a calendar marked with upcoming jobs he wouldn't be able to complete. For the first time since the rescue, Ray allowed himself to consider that maybe, just maybe, his sister was right. A week passed, then two. January deepened, bringing shorter days and colder nights. Ray's small house grew cluttered as his inability to use his hands properly made even simple cleaning tasks challenging. The kitchen sink piled with dishes he couldn't wash without soaking his bandages. Laundry accumulated in the corner of his bedroom. He'd never realized how much he depended on his hands until they were wrapped in gauze and throbbing with pain at the slightest movement. The medical bills had started arriving, thick envelopes with red, urgent stamps that Ray stacked unopened on his coffee table. What was the point in looking at numbers he couldn't pay? His savings account had dwindled to almost nothing after covering the mortgage payment. The electric company had agreed to a payment plan after May called them on his behalf, but his phone service had been cut off 3 days ago. Despite his initial resistance, Ray had allowed Howard to submit the application for the Good Samaritan Fund, but the process was slow, and there was no guarantee he would qualify. Meanwhile, his sister brought him groceries twice a week. His neighbor shoveled his walkway after each snowfall, and Pete and Beth called regularly to check on him. Their kindness both touched and embarrassed him. On a particularly cold Tuesday morning, Ray sat at his kitchen table, attempting to sign his name on a medical release form. His right hand, the dominant one, was healing more slowly than his left, and his signature looked like a child's scrawl. Frustration built as he tried again and again, the pen slipping in his grip. When the doorbell rang, he welcomed the interruption. Standing on his porch was Lily, bundled in a pink winter coat, her mother Beth beside her holding a covered dish. "We brought you some dinner," Lily announced, her breath visible in the cold air. "And I made you a card?" The little girl thrust a homemade card into his hands. On the front was a crayon drawing of what appeared to be Ray pulling two small figures from a blue squiggle that must have been the lake. "It's beautiful," Ray said, genuinely moved. "Thank you, Lily." Beth handed him the casserole dish. "It's just chicken and rice, nothing fancy. But I thought you might be tired of sandwiches and things you can eat with one hand." As they stepped inside, Ray felt a flash of shame at the state of his house. He hadn't been able to vacuum and dust had settled on every surface. Dirty coffee mugs littered the end tables and a pile of mail had cascaded onto the floor. Beth seemed to sense his discomfort. "Lily, why don't you tell Mr. Ray about your science project while I put this in the kitchen?" While Lily chatted about her class's butterfly terrarium, Beth quietly began washing dishes in the sink. Ray started to protest, but she waved him off. "Let me do this," she said firmly. "It's the least I can do." After they left, Ray sat looking at Lily's card for a long time. The stick figure she'd drawn to represent him was smiling, arms outstretched to the children in the water. Is that how she saw him? Not as a man struggling with bills and pain, but as someone strong and capable of saving others. The phone call came the next day. May had insisted on paying to reconnect his phone service, ignoring his objections. Ray was glad now as he picked up the receiver with his less injured left hand. "Mr. Thompson, this is Howard Grant." Ray's heart beat faster. "Yes, I have good news. The Good Samaritan Fund has approved your application. They'll cover all your medical expenses and provide income replacement for 3 months. Relief washed over Ray so intensely he had to sit down. Thank you. Don't thank me, Howard said. The board was unanimous. Your case is exactly what the fund was established for. He paused. There's something else. The story of your rescue has continued to gain attention. Several local businesses have expressed interest in helping once the fund's support ends. Ray's pride flared. I don't need charity. Howard's voice remained steady. It's not charity, Mr. Thompson, it's community. These are people who recognize value in what you did and want to ensure you don't suffer for it. After hanging up, Ray sat motionless, absorbing the news. 3 months of income would get him through the worst of his recovery. The medical bills would be paid. He might actually make it through this without losing his house or going into crippling debt. That afternoon, he called the number Dr. Chen had given him for the hand specialist. The receptionist who answered was warm and efficient. Dr. Wilson can see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. He's been waiting for your call. The hand specialist's office was in a modern medical building across town. May drove Ray there, chattering about school gossip to distract him from his nervousness. In the waiting room, Ray was surprised to find Dr. Chen herself. I wanted to check in on my favorite patient, she explained, sitting beside him. Dr. Wilson is the best hand specialist in the state. I worked with him during my residency. Dr. Wilson turned out to be a tall man with a booming laugh, and hands so large they made Ray's look small in comparison. His examination was gentle but thorough. The good news, he said after studying the x-rays, is that there's no permanent damage to the bones or tendons. The frostbite affected mainly the skin and underlying tissue. With proper therapy, you should regain most, if not all, function. Most? Ray asked, focusing on the qualification. Dr. Wilson nodded, his expression serious. You may experience increased sensitivity to cold in these fingers, and there could be some loss of fine motor control. You might find detailed work more challenging than before. Detailed work was exactly what Ray's carpentry required. His specialty was custom cabinetry and furniture, work that demanded precision and steady hands. But, Dr. Wilson continued, seeing Ray's expression, that's a worst-case scenario. With consistent therapy and patience, many patients recover completely. He scribbled on a prescription pad, I'm prescribing specialized physical therapy 3 times a week, and I want to see you again in 2 weeks. As Ray left the office, clutching his prescription and a handful of pamphlets about hand injuries, Dr. Chen walked him to May's waiting car. Remember, she said, healing isn't just physical. Give yourself permission to accept help. It doesn't make you any less strong. Ray thought about her words that evening as he attempted to prepare a simple meal one-handed. The beans he was trying to open slipped from his grip, the can rolling under the table. He swore in frustration, then sat heavily in a kitchen chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the simplest of tasks. The doorbell interrupted his moment of self-pity. It was Pete, Danny's father, holding Ray's toolbox. Hope you don't mind, Pete said, looking somewhat embarrassed. But Danny hasn't stopped talking about your carpentry work since you mentioned it in the hospital. I thought maybe you could show him a few things. He lifted the toolbox. I found this in your truck. Your sister gave me the keys. I had it detailed and tuned up while I was at it. Ray stared at him in confusion. You had my truck serviced? Pete shrugged. It seemed like the least I could do. Plus, Danny's been asking when you're coming for dinner. I thought maybe I could drive you over this weekend if you're feeling up to it. Before Ray could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of his house. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out wearing a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than Ray's monthly mortgage payment. Mr. Thompson, she called, walking up the path. My name is Angela Chen. I represent Lexus of Pine Ridge. Do you have a moment? Ray and Pete exchanged confused glances as the woman approached. I apologize for arriving unannounced, she said, but our dealership has been following your story. Our owner was particularly moved by your selfless actions at the lake. She handed Ray a business card. We'd like to discuss a proposition with you at your convenience. After she left, promising to call the next day to arrange a proper meeting, Ray and Pete stood in bewildered silence. What do you think that was about? Pete finally asked. Ray shook his head. No idea. Later that night, after Pete had left with a promise to pick him up for dinner on Saturday, Ray found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. His hands still hurt, the bills were still there, and uncertainty about his future as a carpenter lingered. But something had shifted inside him. May called just before bedtime. You'll never believe what I heard at the grocery store, she said without preamble. There's a rumor going around that Lexus is planning some kind of event centered around your rescue. Alice Wong from Channel 4 was asking questions about it. That's strange, Ray said, thinking of the woman who had visited earlier. Their representative stopped by today but didn't say anything specific. Well, whatever it is, it sounds big, May replied. Mrs. Walker from the bakery said they've ordered 50 pastry platters for some kind of press event next week. After hanging up, Ray sat on his porch despite the cold, looking up at the stars. The same stars had been shining the day he'd pulled those children from the lake, a day that now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. So much had changed in such a short time. His truck sat in the driveway looking cleaner than it had in years. Inside the house, Lily's card sat propped on the mantel beside a photo of Ray's parents. His toolbox, which Pete had brought back, rested beside his favorite chair, a tangible reminder of the work he loved and hoped to return to. For so long, he'd measured his worth by his independence, his ability to solve his own problems and make his own way. But these past weeks had taught him something he'd never expected to learn, that sometimes the strongest thing a person could do was to allow others to help carry the load. As he looked out at the quiet street where he'd lived for 12 years, Ray realized he'd never really known his community until now. The neighbors who checked on him, the doctors who went above and beyond their duties, the family of 2 children he'd saved who now treated him like one of their own. And now apparently a luxury car dealership with some mysterious plan. Whatever Lexus wanted, Ray decided he would at least hear them out. After all, what was the worst that could happen? 3 days after the strange visit from the Lexus representative, Ray sat in his living room flipping through channels on his old TV. Physical therapy had worn him out that morning, leaving his hands aching despite the progress Dr. Wilson had praised. The exercises were helping, but recovery was slower than Ray had hoped. He still couldn't hold his carpentry tools properly, and the thought of never returning to his craft lurked in the back of his mind like a shadow. The doorbell rang, interrupting a news report about local weather. Ray heaved himself up from the couch, moving carefully to avoid jarring his sensitive hands. When he opened the door, he found a delivery man holding a large envelope. "Raymond Thompson?" the man asked, consulting his clipboard. "That's me. Sign here, please." Ray awkwardly scrawled something that barely resembled his signature, then took the envelope inside. It bore the Lexus logo in the corner, and he felt a mix of curiosity and wariness as he carefully tore it open. Inside was an elegantly printed invitation to what was described as a community recognition event at the Pine Ridge Lake Public Pavilion, scheduled for the following day at 10 a.m. A handwritten note from Angela. Shan asked him to arrive by 9:30 and to please keep this confidential until the event. Ray set the invitation on his coffee table and stared at it. What exactly did a luxury car dealership want with him? The cynical part of him suspected a publicity stunt. The local hero and the generous corporation, a photo opportunity for their marketing materials. But Mr. Takahashi, the owner, had seemed genuinely interested in Ray's story when they'd met briefly. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. "Did you get one too?" It was Pete, Danny's father, not bothering with a greeting. "An invitation from Lexus? Just now. Same here. For the whole family." "Any idea what it's about?" "None," Ray admitted. "You planning to go?" "Danny's excited about it. Says he wants to see you again anyway. Keeps asking when you're coming back for dinner." Ray smiled at that. He'd grown fond of the boy during their occasional visits. "Tell him I'll be there." After hanging up, Ray called May to see if she could drive him to the event. His truck was back in his driveway, freshly serviced thanks to Pete, but his hands weren't quite ready for driving yet. "Of course I'll drive you," May said. "What's this all about?" "No idea. Some kind of thank you event, I guess." May made a sound that suggested she wasn't convinced. "Well, whatever it is, you should go. Put on that nice blue shirt, the one Mom gave you last Christmas." The next morning dawned bright and cold. Ray stood in front of his bathroom mirror, struggling with the buttons on the blue shirt May had recommended. His fingers moved awkwardly, still stiff from the frostbite damage, but he managed each button with slow determination. Small victories, he reminded himself. May arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did, honking twice from the driveway. She inspected him as he got into the car, reaching over to straighten his collar. "You clean up nice," she said approvingly. Ray grunted, uncomfortable with the compliment. "Let's just get this over with." The drive to Pine Ridge Lake was quiet. Ray watched the familiar scenery pass by, thinking about how much had changed in the 7 weeks since the rescue. The initial media attention had mostly faded. The Good Samaritan Fund had come through as promised, covering his medical expenses and providing some income while he recovered. His hands were improving daily. Life was gradually returning to normal, or a new version of normal. As they approached the lake, Ray's heart beat faster. He hadn't been back since that day, and seeing the frozen expanse through the car window brought a flash of memory. The crack of ice. The children's terrified faces, the numbing cold of the water. "You okay?" May asked, glancing at him with concern. "Fine," he said, pushing away the memory. "Just thinking." The parking lot was surprisingly full for a weekday morning. Ray recognized several cars belonging to local business owners, the mayor's SUV, and a Channel 4 news van. Whatever Lexus had planned, it wasn't a small affair. Angela Chen met them at the entrance to the pavilion, elegant as ever in a tailored coat. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so glad you could make it. And you must be May." She shook May's hand warmly. "We're almost ready to begin. If you'll follow me." The pavilion had been transformed. Heaters had been set up to combat the winter chill, and rows of chairs faced a small stage area. A large object stood in the center of the stage, covered by a blue cloth. Nearly every seat was filled, and Ray recognized many faces, neighbors, local shopkeepers, even some of his former clients. Angela led them to 2 reserved seats in the front row, right next to where Pete, Beth, and their children were already seated. Danny waved excitedly when he saw Ray, and Lily held up a new drawing she'd made. Ray smiled and gave them a small wave as he sat down. "Do you know what's going on?" he whispered to Pete. The other man shook his head. "They've been very mysterious about the whole thing." Before they could speculate further, Mr. Takahashi stepped onto the stage. The crowd hushed as he approached the microphone. "Good morning," he began, his accented English precise and formal. "Thank you all for coming today. We are gathered to honor someone special, a man who reminds us what community truly means." He gestured toward Ray. 7 weeks ago, Raymond Thompson was taking his Sunday walk when he heard cries for help. Without hesitation, he risked his own life to save 2 children who had fallen through the ice on this very lake. A murmur went through the audience. Ray shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling every eye turned toward him. But this was not the first time Mr. Thompson put others before himself. Mr. Takahashi continued. Over the years, he has quietly helped many in this community, building wheelchair ramps for elderly neighbors, volunteering at the youth center, fixing roofs after storms. Ray stared at Mr. Takahashi in confusion. How did he know about those things? They weren't exactly secrets, but Ray had never sought recognition for them. Today, we want to show our appreciation, not just for one heroic act, but for a lifetime of selfless service. Mr. Takahashi nodded to someone off stage, and the mayor stepped forward, holding a framed certificate. "Raymond Thompson," the mayor announced, "on behalf of Pine Ridge, I present you with the key to the city." Applause erupted as Ray was urged to his feet and guided to the stage. He accepted the certificate awkwardly, mumbling a thank you into the microphone when it was thrust toward him. But that, apparently, was just the beginning. One by one, people from the community came forward with stories of how Ray had helped them over the years. Mrs. Wilson spoke about the time he fixed her roof for free after her husband died. The director of the youth center thanked him for teaching carpentry to kids who needed direction. Even Ray's old high school teacher appeared, reminiscing about how teenage Ray had built new bookshelves for the school library as a summer project. With each story, Ray felt more overwhelmed. He'd never thought of these actions as special, just the right thing to do when neighbors needed help. Finally, Mr. Takahashi returned to the microphone. "And now the reason we asked you all here today." He moved to the cloth-covered object center stage. Mr. Thompson's injuries have made it difficult for him to continue his carpentry business. His hands, damaged in the rescue, may never regain their former dexterity. Ray winced at hearing his private fear stated so publicly, but we believe a man who has given so much deserves a new beginning. With a dramatic flourish, Mr. Takahashi pulled away the cloth to reveal a gleaming black Lexus SUV, its surface reflecting the winter sunlight. "This vehicle is yours, Mr. Thompson, with all expenses paid." But that is not all. Angela stepped forward holding a leather folder. "Lexus of Pine Ridge, along with several local businesses, has established a trust fund in your name. It will not only cover your remaining medical expenses, but also provide capital for you to expand your business in new directions. Perhaps hiring assistants to help with the physical work while you oversee the design and craftsmanship. Ray stared at the SUV, then at the folder Angela was offering him. The generosity was so unexpected, so overwhelming that for a moment he couldn't speak. In the silence, a small voice piped up from the audience. "Does this mean Ray is rich now?" Danny asked loudly, causing laughter to ripple through the crowd. The tension broken, Ray found his voice. "I don't know what to say," he admitted into the microphone. "I'm not good at speeches. I did what anyone would have done that day at the lake, but not everyone would have," called a voice from the back, one of the firefighters who'd arrived at the scene that day. "That ice shouldn't have held your weight. You beat the odds, man." Ray looked out at the sea of familiar faces, all watching him with warmth and respect. His gaze found May, who was wiping tears from her eyes despite her earlier promise not to get all emotional at this event. He saw Pete and Beth, their children, bouncing with excitement in their seats. He saw his neighbors and friends and even some strangers, all united in this moment of community. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for this," he gestured to the SUV, "but for everything these past weeks. For showing me that I'm not alone." As the formal ceremony ended and people gathered around to congratulate him, Ray found himself pulled aside by Dr. Wilson, the hand specialist. "I've been consulting with some colleagues about your case," the doctor said quietly. "There's a new therapy showing promising results for frostbite recovery. With your permission, I'd like to recommend you for the program. One more piece of unexpected hope on a day full of surprises." Later, as Ray sat behind the wheel of his new SUV, not driving yet, just feeling the smooth leather beneath his healing hands, Danny and Lily clambered into the back seat, exclaiming over every feature and button, "This is the coolest car ever," Danny declared, pressing his face against the window. "It's very shiny," Lily agreed, carefully touching the soft interior. Ray watched them in the rearview mirror, these children whose lives had become unexpectedly entwined with his. Their joy was contagious, their excitement genuine in the way only children's emotions can be. Outside, the community he'd always known but never fully seen was celebrating, not just his heroism but their own capacity for kindness. May was chatting with Beth, probably exchanging recipes or stories about Ray's childhood. Pete was examining the SUV's engine with Mr. Takahashi, both men nodding appreciatively. The lake that had nearly claimed 3 lives now glittered peacefully in the winter sun, ice solid and secure beneath a fresh dusting of snow. Ray looked at it and felt not fear or pain, but a sense of connection to this place, these people, and a future he couldn't have imagined 7 weeks ago. Sometimes life's greatest turns come when we least expect them. Sometimes our darkest moments lead to our brightest beginnings, and sometimes the simple act of helping others returns to us in ways we never could have predicted, not because we're seeking reward, but because genuine goodness creates ripples that eventually come back to shore.